Good evening. Welcome. Sorry about that. My name is Cindy Swanson. I'm a director of the Chamber of Commerce, Brantford-Brant, and your moderator this evening. Our chamber is pleased to be the community producer of this program in partnership with Rogers TV. This evening's debate features candidates running for Ward 4. Our city is facing a number of challenges, and bold action and strategic measures are required to ensure our long-term success and prosperity. I congratulate all the candidates on their commitment to our community, and we look forward to having an interesting evening. The candidates running for Ward 4 are Cheryl Antosky, Richard Carpenter, Rob Ferguson, and Mike Gomon. Our panelists this evening are Peter Choma, a director of the Chamber of Commerce, and David Prang, our first vice president of the Chamber of Commerce. Our timer this evening is Charlene Nicholson, CEO of the Chamber. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to make their opening remarks. The order of speaking was determined by a random draw. The panelists will alternate posing questions. Each candidate will have the opportunity to respond to each question for a 2-minute time limit that we will impose. In the instance of one candidate making a personal comment or a specific reference to another candidate, that candidate will be allowed a 45-second rebuttal. Each candidate will be allowed 1 minute for a closing statement, and that will be in reverse order to the opening statements. The timekeeper will indicate when the candidates have 15 seconds remaining and when they have reached the maximum time allowed. In the case of a challenge, the decision of the moderator will be final. I would ask that the candidates adhere to the agreed upon format and exercise professional decorum throughout this debate. Thank you. We will begin with the candidates' opening remarks. The first candidate will be Rob Ferguson.
Thank you. It's on. Thank you for Rogers for being here and broadcasting this. And I'd also like to thank my fellow opponents. It's good to see good quality candidates right across the city. It shows to me that the general public is definitely interested in what's going on in our city this time around. My name is Rob Ferguson. I've run in provincial, municipal, federal elections. I currently hold the position of leader of the Ontario Libertarian Party. I have this dream. Being legally blind, I see opportunities differently. I see the frustrations of small businesses. I see the frustrations of the general public. They're tired of overspending. They're tired of being ignored. They're tired of bad policy and bad politicians here at the City of Brantford. I look forward to tonight's debate, working with my fellow candidates on resolutions to the questions asked. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. I would also like to thank Rogers for hosting this, or for the Chamber for hosting, and for Rogers airing it to make sure that the residents have the opportunity to make informed decisions, and also to my fellow candidates for putting their names forward. I'm currently one of Ward 4 councillors. I've been a resident of Ward 4 for 20 plus years with my husband and my 3 grown children. I've worked hard the past 4 years as your representative, and together we've created positive things for Ward 4 and the rest of the city. Things such as community gardens, mid-sized performance theatres, food charter, recycling enhancements, and infrastructure priorities are all things that we are working on and need to continue moving forward with. We've seen several businesses expand and many new businesses come to Ward 4, and this is of benefit to the whole city. I'd like to continue to be your partner and representative. Thank you.
Thank you. I too want to thank Rogers Cable and the Chamber of Commerce for putting on all these events. It takes a lot of time and work. I want to thank all the candidates, not just the Ward 4 candidates here, but all the candidates in the city that put their name forward in all the ridings, and for the school boards and for mayor. It serves our city well when we get a good variety of candidates. It makes for great democracy and gives the public fantastic choices to make for our community. I've been your Ward 4 representative for the past 24 years. I've lived in this community my whole life. I'm married to my wife, Jenny, who sits behind me, and our 40th anniversary will be just next week. I have 2 grown children. I have Christopher, who's married to Rebecca, and they have 3 children, our grandchildren, and my daughter, Jessica, who's married to Casey, and they have 5 children. And all of those 8 grandchildren are in my neighborhood within a couple blocks from Jenny and I, so we have a great time. So I've been your counselor, as I said, for 24 years, representing you. You keep re-electing me because I believe that my job is to serve you, and that's what I'll continue to do if re-elected to Ward 4. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Next, we have Mike Gomon.
Anyway, my name is Mike Beaumont. I'm running in Ward 4. I'm ready to work with the people. Also, since I work for the City of Hamilton, I have a lot of experience in water, wastewater, roads, and everything else. And I come here and I'm ready to work for you with your help and support. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Now we will begin with the questions, and we'll start with David Prang.
Thank you. The city's economic development portfolio is diverse and includes more than the traditional commercial and industrial sectors. How do you see the arts, culture, heritage, and tourism sectors as economic drivers? And how would you work with our neighbors on Six Nations and in the county to capitalize on the economic opportunities of these sectors?
And Cheryl, we'll start with you.
Thanks for the question, David. I've been pleased to see that our ECDEV strategy of 2016 has identified arts and culture as being strong in our community and something that we really need to put more emphasis on and support greater. I know that we are currently completing the first phase of a mid-sized theater. That's something we've been looking at for probably 20 years now. We've also got a resolution that's being looked at for a music and film theater, music and film office and media office. We've already got companies coming to us to do these types of things. What we don't have is a good strategy in place and a good process in place to make it easy for them and to make sure that more are coming. I think that this is a perfect example of one of those things people tend to look at as a want, and I think the ROI is something that we need to be looking at. Our ECDEV strategy has shown through best practices and other communities that this is an economic driver, and it brings business, it brings people, not only to just live here, but come and visit and see what we're doing. So we need to put more emphasis in that. And I think that we've started, I think this last term of council has started that. We need to keep it moving forward. I think this is a great direction to take.
Thank you, Cheryl. Next, we'll hear from Richard.
Thank you. Yes, it's proven through the numbers that tourism is an economic driver. Tourism, culture, and heritage. Not just our natural heritage, but our built heritage as well. I think that seems to be forgotten. Our built heritage also attracts tourism. It's important to consider that. But the heritage, and working with Six Nations and the county on tourism, economic development, and heritage and culture is something that we do now, and we could do better, and we are working to do better. It certainly has an economic driver for our community. It's one of the pillars that make Brantford-Brant County and Six Nations a great place to live, work, and play because we do that. So we do it well. And I think there's always room for improvement in anything we do, but we do it well now, and we're well versed in making sure that happens. We've got lots of communities to work together. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Mike, it's your turn.
I don't know too much about it, but I agree with what Richard Carpenter said.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
And Rob?
I spent almost 15 years with special events here in the city. And our core committees had issues, whether it be financial or red tape. And we were always dealing with that. One of the reasons we no longer have a Riverfest festival in the city is because of those two issues. If we relax this red tape that's within our control, then the concentration of those core committee members could be on fundraising. The other issue is we need to meet with them. We need to talk to them. We have to have that discussion. The discussion is healthy. That's how you get resolution. Not every 4 years during election time you talk about it, but during the time when it's time to serve, it's time to sit down together and have these resolutions on what will benefit these groups. They are a positive thing to our community. They bring in funding. They bring in tourists, which is a plus in all cycles. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Peter has the next question.
Good evening, everyone. Cannabis will be legalized this month. Studies show that a single retail outlet can generate up to 30 jobs and up to $3 million in capital spending. How can the municipality support local entrepreneurs who operate retail outlets while balancing the need for public safety and education?
We'll begin with you, Richard.
Thank you, Peter. Education is going to be a must with the legalization of cannabis later on this month. And then the city's going to have an opportunity to opt in or opt out. I think we've got no choice but to opt in. Because I'm on the cannabis committee looking at these issues, and one of the issues that's not being looked at is our Six Nations neighbors. How is it going to impact on them, and how is that going to impact on us? So the city's looking at right now actually banning smoking on city facilities, because the last thing I want to do as a parent or grandparent walking my grandchildren through the Gretzky Center and going through a puff of cannabis smoke, some smoking pot. I'm not opposed to what you do yourself, but unfortunately the provincial government has taken it out of the Alcohol Act and put it in the Tobacco Act. And cannabis is going to be allowed to be smoked any place tobacco can be smoked. So that's why the city's looking at banning smoking on all of its facilities and properties to at least protect the citizens that use those facilities and properties. As far as the business side of it, of course, the business has a right, but we'll have it in a planning. We already have protection for Planning Act, so we will have zoning that will be required for planning for cannabis. I'm not a fan of vape lounges, and they're opening wildly around the city now. You talk to anybody from the health unit, they'll tell you, why would you be vaping? There's lots of things about why vaping is bad for you health-wise, and I'm not too sure why would we be making something legal that will hurt your health and cost the taxpayers more money on health costs. So there's lots of questions as far as businesses and how we would support them, be zoning and making sure that they're not all in one area, that they're actually away from schools and in protected areas, and maybe some centrifugal circles so that they're far enough away from each other that they're not formed in clusters, and that they could service the community properly and the city can still benefit. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Mike, it's your turn.
Can you, I'm sorry,
Mike's hard here.
I'm getting that. Can you repeat?
I've turned all the mics up, so hopefully that will help you out, Mike, okay?
I don't know, it's hard for me to hear. Can you repeat the question, please?
Absolutely. Cannabis will be legalized this month. Studies show that a single retail outlet can generate up to 30 jobs and up to $3 million in capital spending. So the question is, how can the municipality support local entrepreneurs who operate retail outlets while balancing the need for public safety and education?
Well, first of all, people are going to smoke it here regardless, and they are going to make a lot of money off it. And for some people, if it creates employment, they have a job. I'm not against it. I don't smoke it, but I'm not against it.
Thank you, Mike. And next, we'll hear from Rob.
Cannabis, marijuana, it's just a plant. Government, municipal, provincial, federal, they need to be elsewhere doing other things. But as this transition happens, where it becomes more and more into the society, education, again, some other candidates have said the same thing. Education is key. It's not a bad thing. We can work with stores. Right now, we trust stores to sell cigarettes, to proof children for ID, underage people. We never have a problem. I don't think I have ever seen a protest in front of a store that sells cigarettes. We trust them. The same thing is going to happen with cannabis and marijuana and some of the other products related to that. I think that the one thing that has to be considered here as well is most smokers, whether it be tobacco or cannabis, are really self-responsible and they actually know. Myself, I'm a smoker. I go to a park. I'm way away from the kids. I don't need the government telling me where I can't smoke. I should know this. So it's about communication, and I think education is going to be the foundation of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. And Cheryl, we'll hear from you now.
Thank you, Cindy. I'm going to repeat some of what's already been said. The education component is critical here. This has been a fast-moving train, and it's been changing quite rapidly in the recent past. I think that we need to support our businesses for this. I think this is an opportunity. We're constantly saying we need more revenue streams, but I do struggle with the fact that it's been moved into the Tobacco Act because I was much more comfortable with it when, if I go on my break at work and there's a smoking area, I can't bring a beer out with me, but does this mean we can now go and smoke a joint on our break? And so I have some concerns and safety issues, safety concerns around those things. I think the only option is to opt in. It gives us some opportunity to create revenue streams, new business, new jobs, also to control the substance and hopefully be pushing out the black market a little bit more and know what is in the substance, that it is a plant and not laced with other things. I like that piece of it. But I do think that, and I'm happy that the city has a task force working on this now, trying to stay ahead of the pack and trying to figure out where and how we get this education out to several different sectors. It's our older generation, some are struggling with it from a recreational perspective. We've already got the medicinal piece that's okay. And we've been asking the feds, where's the educational piece? How are we rolling this out? Are you going to help us with this? Because we know that the cost is going to come to the municipality from any kind of safety and policing issues. So opt in, yes, let's find a way to control it. Let's help our businesses and our and employment. But let's take control of that education piece.
Thank you, Cheryl. David, you have the next question.
Thank you. If successful, you'll represent a specific ward within the city of Brantford. While some issues are common to all wards and to the community at large, there are issues and challenges specific to each ward in the city. The question is, what are the top priorities for your ward, and how will you advocate for those issues?
Mike, you're the first response.
One of them is property tax. Second of all, the phone calls. If there's a complaint, I would try to get back to them within 24 hours. And the service, the ward, they don't like the service. And anyway, I would work with the constituents and get back to them as soon as I could. And if I made a promise, it would be a promise kept. Promise made, sorry, promise kept.
Thank you, Mike. And next, we'll hear from Rob.
As stated in the question, there's so many issues in Brantford. It's not just one ward. Traffic is a concern. Traffic lights is a concern. Every day we have accidents at specific intersections in the city, but yet nothing is done to prevent it. I know in Ward 4, tire recycling was an issue 4 years ago, and it still is. Some of those neighbors have now sold their house and moved away. They just don't want to deal with it. So it's still an issue. Property tax, a hot one, no matter what ward we go into. Property tax keeps going up and up and up, and the cost of living keeps going up and up and up. And what we need to do is go the other way and stabilize so people have more money in their pocket to enjoy. Servicing the citizens of Ward 4. In the last 4 years, I probably had about 15 citizens of Ward 4 email me or call me. And although I wasn't elected, I put it through Public Works or whatever the concern was, and I enjoyed that. That's who I am. I want a chance to serve Ward 4. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. And Cheryl will be next.
Thank you. I'll pick a couple of different ones, and I think that Ward 4, we've got two very distinct neighborhoods in our ward, and so we have different issues at one end of the ward than we may have at the other end. So in the north, certainly we're experiencing some issues with public transit, and I realize that we've got a bigger picture. We're looking to improve our transit system, but in the meantime, we've got a couple of routes that have really stranded some of our residents, and the change has created unsafe conditions in terms of crossing. And so we need to look at that more closely, see what can be done without terribly jeopardizing the overall plan. And flooding's been an issue in the North End as well. Infrastructure is struggling keeping up with our 100-year storms, which are happening much more frequently now. And in the South End, I would say that we've got a couple of issues that really affect the same area, and it would be what is traditionally known as the BSAR, and also the Mohawk Lake District. So the residents there are really interested to see what's going to happen and how we're going to build out the Mohawk Lake District, and we also have a committee working on that. And they're also very concerned from a negative perspective about the BSAR coming through their neighborhood and really wiping out an established neighborhood. So to try and pick both ends of the wards, those are the two on each end I would think we need to be working on.
Thank you, Cheryl. And last, we'll hear from Richard.
Thank you for the question. The thing that's specific to Ward 4 is also general to the rest of the wards in the city. The number one issue has been traffic. Everybody's in a hurry. Everybody's speeding. No one uses stop signs like they're supposed to use stop signs. They roll right through them. We have difficulty with people doing so at crosswalks where children are going to school. Crossing guards have been nearly clipped. It's a major issue with people just not realizing they need to slow down. They're still going to get there just as quick. That's probably the number one issue. But across all the city boundaries. We look at the north part of the ward, the Brantland Arc. Powerline Road is a concern. Now that the city has expanded across Powerline Road now is part of the city boundary. That road will need to be upgraded to a proper collector road, a 4-lane road to service the people of Brentwood Park and beyond that, and the new development that will happen north of Ward, the north part of Ward 4, north of Powerline Road, is an issue. On the south part of the ward, we have the issue of petty crime. We have a little bit because of the transient nature of people staying in the hotels along the Colbert Street stretch and the kind of difficulty we're having with that, and we're working on those issues collectively. And then we have in the what I would call the east part of the south part of the ward, where residential development should not have been existed when it was Ward 5. Councillors then decided to move that in as a residential development. That's caused gigantic problems for both the ward councillors. Try and make a neighborhood that's next to an industrial subdivision, and then work with noise bylaws and the industrial subdivision, which was there first, to try and make the neighborhood compatible, and to design a neighborhood that's built piecemeal by 3 or 4 different developers that comes cohesively into one neighborhood with parks and trails and everything being blended together. That's very difficult to do, but we've been working at it and we're finding solutions, and we're getting there. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. And Peter will have the next question.
Councillors often make decisions on issues that affect not only the ward they represent, but the entire community. An example might be a business that wants to locate in your ward, which is opposed by the majority of your constituents, but would provide employment and assessment that benefits the entire community. The question is, how will you balance the wishes of the constituents you represent with the needs of the community at large?
We'll hear from you first, Rob.
This is kind of a fun one because you're elected to your ward, and that is your primary concern. Is your ward. Now your ward makes up a portion of the city, so the secondary is your city. So in this case, having some business, say an adult nature business that wanted to set up close to Brantland School, of course they're going to oppose that. There's other opportunities. There's other locations. You'd work with that establishment to find a balance between bringing to Brantford jobs and money and keeping my ward safe and clean and happy. Tire recycling. 15 years, I said, put it out in the county, and they put it downtown Brantford almost, and it would have worked better out in the county. So it's something about balance there, working with the new business owner and keeping the stronghold that you're elected to your ward. And that is your fundamental purpose, is to represent the citizens of your ward. Go to battle for that.
Thank you, Rob. And next we'll hear from Cheryl.
Thank you. We had a nice segue from the last question into this, and I'm going to talk about businesses coming in. We've got quite a few residential neighborhoods that abut industrial neighborhoods, and that's been a challenge. What I've been seeing, a ward meeting is critical. People need to know what's going on in the backyard, what's about to happen. And what I've been seeing quite a bit of this term is our developers are listening to the residents and doing a good job within their confines to come back to find some reasonable solutions. And we're finding a large number of those needs met. So I think that's the number one thing. The other thing that is of concern when that happens, and we need to find a good way to work through this, is that when changes are made, so you go to your ward meeting, you see this is what's going to happen, you understand what you think is going to be built, and then changes happen as things start to get built. And that's very concerning for the residents. So I think we need to actually put something in a process that, even if it fits within the zoning curriculum and the zoning laws that we have, that if there is a change and you said that you're going to build, a light industrial, and you end up putting a large, massive, heavy industrial building instead, that needs to be brought back to another ward meeting. So I am seeing some successes. I think we need to support our businesses coming, and we as a city need to be making sure that if we've got those two types of developments beside each other, residential and zoning, that we're doing things like widening roads when they need to happen, because we can't do it after the fact. And once things are built, having school buses and cars and transport trucks running on narrow roads is just not a good solution. So we need to be on top of that.
Thank you, Cheryl. And next we'll hear from Richard.
Thank you. This is always a very difficult thing to do, but you have the public meeting with your constituents. First of all, you meet with the developer in advance of meeting with your constituents, and you try and allay some of the concerns that your constituents are going to have with this development that you know as being a ward councillor and knowing your constituents as well as you do. So then you have your public meeting and you let the constituents voice their concerns and all the issues, whether they're factual or not, you let them voice their concerns, and then the developer will work and explain the development to the constituents, and then we try and find compromise. So what works best to make sure the constituents will be happy? If this development is going to go forward, what would the constituents like it to look like? And then the developer works to make sure that can happen, and the compromise happens. But you also don't accept the compromise verbally. We make sure we put the compromise in the conditions of the zoning or the approval that comes through council. It needs to be in writing, because we've had the experience where you could promise everything, but doing it's another matter. And the development could get sold, and another developer take it over and have a different vision. So we make sure it's in writing. But the question was, how would you handle it between the constituents and the developer? You're elected by your constituents. You serve them. They are number one, and you make that clear to the developer up front, and then that makes the developer work up that much harder to make it work. Once that developer is approved, then that developer becomes part of your constituent base as well, and then they're part of the priority. But for me, it's the constituents closest to the development, most affected by the development, that give the most weight to what their concerns are, because they're the ones that are most affected by it. And so you kind of assign a weight, I assign a weight to the constituents based on that. But I work on behalf of my constituents first. I'm the servant, and that's what they elect me to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Mike, you're up next.
I agree with what he said because he knows more than me. I agree with him.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you very much.
Okay. David will have the next question.
Thank you. The city's operating and capital budgets combined total more than $200 million. A private sector company with a similar budget would require its decision makers to have the skills and the expertise necessary to make sound financial decisions. What past experience do you have that will best enable you to make sound decisions based on business principles that will benefit your constituents and the community at large? And where do you see opportunities to hold or reduce expenditures on council?
So we'll hear from Cheryl first on this question.
Thank you. There was a lot in that question. So first of all, the skills that I bring to the table. So my husband and I have been business owners for over 20 years. We understand the struggles of a small business. Also, I was the chair of the Police Services Board that at that time, I believe, had a budget of about $28 million and was fortunate enough to go through everything from the budget cycle to negotiating the contracts to the change of command. So that was a great experience. I've been on council for the past 4 years, and 2 of those years I've been on the finance committee. In terms of reducing or holding the line on expenses, always a difficult question because it can't be looked at in a vacuum. Something might cost some money, but what's it going to bring? So I don't like to look just at costs on its own. What is the return on investment? Intensification, we're looking at some significant growth, and we need to have. We've got some pretty impressive intensification targets now. We've been asked by the province to strengthen them, and I say the more intensified we become, the less burden there is on the residents because we've got more people using the same infrastructure. So those are a couple of things that I think we really need to be paying attention to.
Thank you, Cheryl. Next, we'll hear from Richard.
Yes, you're correct. It's just a little under $150 million operating budget and a $50 million capital budget. So what experience do I have? Well, I have 24 years of experience of working with budgets. Many of those years as chair of the budget committee. It's a daunting task going through the budget, but I want to address the question you said, how would you operate like a business? The city's not a business. The city is a service. And the chamber asks this question every election. It irks me because we're not a business. We can be business-like, and I understand that. And we should be business-like, and we should operate like business-like. But we are community service, providing community, taking care of community assets, making sure the infrastructure is done right. How would I reduce costs? Do the infrastructure right the first time. Do the infrastructure first. Make sure everybody's paying their fair share is another way to do it. And make sure you don't sell off community services because you haven't balanced things out right. When we talk about budgets and revenue, I've been raising this several times, and I guess it's coming forward finally through planning, is that when the city puts a plan of subdivision in, for example, a plan of subdivision comes to council, the cost-benefit analysis isn't there. It's going to be in the future. It doesn't tell us how much revenue we're expected to generate from residential property taxes and what the cost is going to be to provide those services, ambulance, police, fire, and all the services that are there. And I believe, and I'm quite sure, it's a net loss. And so the city keeps building housing without building industrial and commercial subdivisions. It doesn't have enough money to run the business properly. That's been my experience. So if we're going to run the business properly, what would I do? I'd work like heck to make sure we have an industrial, and I passed a resolution at council this way, have a joint industrial park with the county at both the airport and at Cairnsville, and get that industrial and commercial revenue flowing so we can keep and maintain the services that we have and, in fact, enhance them, and then lower the tax base for all those industrial and commercial components because we've increased it by the volume. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Mike?
I've never had the privilege of sitting on a budget committee, but one thing for sure, I agree with what Mr. Carpenter says. I've never been on the committee, I wish, but he knows better than me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. And Rob, you're up next.
Let's be honest, budgets don't balance themselves. What we need to do is lower this bracket. We need to balance what we have. We need to stop overspending. I've watched for 4 years council and decisions made by the city of Brantford where they're spending more than they actually are making. And they're spending on things that the community doesn't necessarily support. As for a personal issue, myself, as an owner of a small business in Brantford, like Cheryl, you understand the budgeting process. We have to live within our means as a small business. We have to live within our means as a city. This is what we've got. How do we properly spend it? That's the more focus that this council should be doing is realizing that this pot is all we have and we need to spend more wisely, not more money. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. And next we'll hear from Peter.
Thank you. Our community faces a number of transportation issues, and the lack of progress on the BSAR is certainly at or close to the top of the list. It impacts not only the residents and businesses in wards 1 and 5, but the entire community. Other initiatives, such as the Mohawk Lake project, are being adversely affected by the delay, and there is increasing demand to make a decision and move forward. The question is, this project has been under discussion and planned for decades. Which of the routes currently being proposed do you support, and will you commit to voting for a specific route by December 2020, which is the end of the second year of your term?
And we'll begin with Richard.
I would hope that we would commit to a direction early in the new council. It's going to take that much time, 4 years, just to get it going after do the EA. But I would support moving the Oak Park Road section as soon as possible. The people in Shelters Lane don't necessarily want to go west to go east, but once that's developed and they realize they're only going west for a couple of minutes and then they're on the 403, they'd be quite happy and they'd be able to access it. It would also encourage commercial development there. But the BSAR is nowhere near what it was supposed to be. The BSAR was supposed to be 100 km/h roadway from the 403 to the 403. It's been downgraded several times by past councils and by lobby groups that didn't want to see it happen at all. And so now it's full of traffic lights, and it's really just an arterial road. But you're right. One thing I would like to correct you, it affects Ward 4 dramatically. Just go down Clarence Street or up West Street. Try and cross any of those streets safely. It's dangerous. There's too much traffic volume on there now. It's a direct problem. It needs to be fixed. It needs to be fixed right away. I've been pushing for County Road 18. It's in the county and borders the city, but County Road 18 is also another option that we should be looking at with the Oak Park Road one. County Road 18 could be 4-lane. It can go right. It already goes to Garden Ave, where we know the new 424 is going to be connecting up through Pushlinch and down to Garden Ave. Why not push that through? It goes to Mount Pleasant, which is 2 blocks from Conklin Street and Shelters Lane in the first place, and move it through the Farmers Field there to Rest Acres Road. And you'll have a ring road around the city from one access 403 to the other. Make it 4 lanes. Get rid of all the traffic lights and put turning circles on there, and you move a lot of traffic around the city, and everybody benefits. Who wouldn't fund a program that was in the county, the city, and 6 nations? What federal government wouldn't fund that program? And we get the funding as well. I think that needs to be looked at.
Thank you, Richard. Mike, your turn.
Well, I can't answer that question because I'm not familiar with that. Sorry.
That's okay. Rob?
We don't build a building, stop halfway through it, and let it sit there for 20 years in hope that people will use it as a building. You have to finish the project. This project was different rates, cost over the last 20 years. Plans changed a lot over the last 20 years. And I think the community, the citizens of Brantford, have been confused a lot because we as candidates, we're confused because we're not certain what plan is where and what plan is effective. But as for the question, I would also commit to early on in the term setting this in forward. I think the Park Road North part of this has to be complete, not only for the businesses along Coven Street in that area, but we're also seeing businesses spending their own money to widen entrance ways, to accommodate traffic because of this. So they're already doing this. We need to finish this project so we can go on to other ones. There are other pressing issues in the city. We need to finish this and go on to new things.
Thank you, Rob. And Cheryl?
Thank you. I also support the County Road 18 ring road. It's an opportunity to have another partnership. We've got a lot of residents in Echo Place that want to protect their homes and want to protect their neighborhood, and they have a lot of history there. This could be part of a heritage discussion as well. Not to mention the ripple effect of we have a housing crisis, and we're going to be taking homes out of there, and that doesn't make any logical sense to me when we've got some different options now. We may not have had the same options 20 years ago, and when we look forward to the boundary expansion, that things are different than they were 20 years ago. I think that we need to look at it freshly, and I think that we need to be careful that we're not causing unintended consequences in other sectors, such as housing.
Thank you very much, Cheryl. And David will have the next question.
Thank you. Decisions made by municipal governments affect our day-to-day lives more than any other level of government. Municipalities fund infrastructure and provide core services such as roads and sewers. Our community has experienced a number of incidents in the past 12 months that have strained or outright compromised some of our key infrastructure. We are struggling with a lack of capacity to service growth, both new growth and infill growth. The question is, how will you ensure that infrastructure is a priority for the next term of council so that we have the necessary core services that are critical to our continued success?
We'll begin with you, Mike.
I don't think you can ensure that. It takes time. All I know is the infrastructure here in Brantford is terrible. The wastewater is bad, and I know a lot of water need replacing, but who knows when that will be done? Who knows? Maybe the next council, maybe council after that. It's hard to say. And money is a factor, and I guess labor is a factor too. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. And next we'll hear from Rob.
Well, first off, infrastructures and the umbrella of infrastructures, we need to start opening up some of these tendering process and allow more competition. With competition, you're going to get different pricing, lower pricing. The other issue is consultants. We're elected to sit here and make decisions. Not everything has to go to a consulting firm and the taxpayers pay for it. So if we sit here and make those decisions, we can save on the consulting fees. And I think that infrastructures in general, the traffic is a big one in Ward 4 along Linna Road and in the Garden Ave area. I mean, these are concerns. Garbage is definitely an issue. Some of the constituents, they support a green bin idea. These are things that are ignored, and they shouldn't be ignored. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. And next we'll hear from Cheryl.
Thank you. Good asset management planning. This allows us to plan more appropriately for our prioritization. I was at an AMO meeting this year, and it was one of the hot topics. We're not the only community suffering a huge deficit from infrastructure. It is a province-wide, probably a Canadian-wide stress, and so I think that we need to make sure we've got good asset management planning. If we were to talk about, for instance, you use the example of the pumping stations. We didn't have a master servicing plan prior to 2014, so having that now has helped us to identify our needs and move forward more proactively. We need to make sure that we have all of those identifying processes in place. There's talk at AMO of adding a 1% to the HST, and that certainly has some controversy around it. But when you're looking at revenue and expenses, that where else do you get the revenue from? And it would have to be proportionally divided among the communities. So, and we know our infrastructure is aging, and much of it is at the end of its life. So, it's prioritization. It's doing the best that we can to make sure that we're not paying on the back end, so not paying out $5 million for a flooding event that happened because our infrastructure couldn't handle it, because that money is gone. That was reactive. There was none of that money that went towards preventing that issue again. So it's the proactive money up front and identifying them early enough.
Thank you, Cheryl. And next we'll hear from Richard.
Infrastructure is priority one. Without the infrastructure, you can't have homes, you can't have industry, you can't have business. It was a surprise to council to know that the Entry Street pumping station was over or at capacity. It wasn't a surprise to me about the Fifth Avenue pumping station, because when we took over Aqua 3 years ago, employees at Aqua told me that pumping station was past its capacity, and the individual that was working there, we took on for a little while, but only he could fix that pump on a regular basis to keep it working. Years ago, our planner, our engineer, Ron Milton, made that empty street pumping station large enough, well in advance, and it lasted for a long, long time. And what hasn't happened is we haven't put money back in the infrastructure to make sure that stays that way. There's some other things I argue about with the council on a regular basis. If, capital is in the ground stuff, operating is people and wages. But we find it happening on budgets all the time, where staff put an individual body, 3 or 4 of them, into capital, saying, well, they work on roads, so they're capital. And now the capital dollars is decreased because instead of the operating side, reduced to keep the tax rate down, but we're increasing the employee base at the expense of operating, and we're not doing the operating right. And then we decide that we're going to put we were supposed to put a sports park down in Southern Ring. It was supposed to take place in the 3 baseball fields that we took out at the Gretzky Center. Now it's 4 baseball fields, 3 football fields, 1 with a dome on it, a library and a community center, and it's got an outside limit of $55 million. That's a lot of infrastructure dollars that could have been spent elsewhere. So all I'm saying is that we got to prioritize what's important. If the infrastructure is not fixed, we don't do anything else. We don't start selling off assets because we can't afford the infrastructure. We take care of the infrastructure first. If that happens, you take care of the infrastructure, you bring the businesses in and bring tax revenue, then you can provide the services the communities want. We have it in the wrong order sometimes. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Peter, you have the next question.
The city of Brantford's success is closely tied to the success of our neighbors in the county of Brant. We share a boundary and have had some success sharing resources. There is much more that can be done. The question is, what are 2 key and substantive areas or services that you believe could be improved upon by partnering with our neighbors in the county?
Okay, and we'll start with Rob for this question.
Going number 1 is always tough because you got to do it on the fly. So right off the top, inter-county transit. We could have citizens of Brantford visiting Paris, 6 Nations, St. George, Applefest, all these special events are just generalized. Those people can now come to Brantford. So an inter-county transit would serve a great need for everyone. I think another issue here is community trucks, the city employees. Often we don't go out to the county to assist, and often the county doesn't come out to us to assist. So I do know on a fire relation, the county in Brantford, they have that relationship. But it would be nice to establish that relationship with, say, Public Works. We can get more done together if we work together. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. And next we'll hear from Cheryl.
Thanks. My top 2 would be transit and arts and culture. Transit makes a lot of sense. I think that I'm naming 2. I think almost everything that we can do can create a better regional government and region. If we can work together, we can all prosper together. I think that arts and culture tends to be something that people will travel for. It's not just designated for your local community, and that creates tourism, and as does heritage. And transit just, I think it kind of speaks for itself. It's just getting people around and being able to enjoy and participate and share the revenue and share the money that people are spending in our region.
Thank you, Cheryl. And next we'll hear from Richard.
Thank you for the question. I would say police, fire, transit, economic development, infrastructure, the two sports, or not, 2 parks that I'm talking about, industrial parks, working together, that would be another way. And infrastructure, doing the roads infrastructure, so transportation master plan that we're doing now with the county and the city is another way. You all know that if I had my way, there'd be 1 municipality. But if we can't have 1 municipality, I'm quite happy to work as one. So on all areas, we should be working together that benefits each other. As was said, we all benefit by each other's success. And the county and the city are going to be very successful. The more that we work together, the faster we're going to be successful. So any way we can do that. And I think we should have joint meetings. I proposed this some time ago, and it fell off the agenda for some reason. We should have joint meetings with the city, the county, and 6 Nations on a regular basis, And when it fell off the agenda, I asked why it fell off the agenda, and the answer was, well, we didn't have anything to put on the agenda, so we didn't meet. We don't have to have something on the agenda just to meet, to understand each other as human beings, to understand each other as people, and to first of all get that mutual respect, and then coming together and working together. You can't get mutual respect by yelling at each other, throwing things at each other, or swearing at each other. That doesn't work. You've got to get together and know each other as people, as parents, and as individuals, and then you work from there, saying that we're all in this together. How do we benefit together? And we have to treat each other as equals too. We got to stop this. Well, the county's smaller, so we get 4 representatives, you get 2. That's nonsense. Business would never operate through businesses like that. If you treat each other equally, as equal partners and with respect, and you'll get a lot more done. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. And Mike, you're up.
Well, I agree with, pardon me, I agree with what he just said. I don't know much, but I know he's right. Oh, you can hear me now. Anyway, thank you. I agree with him.
Thank you, Mike. Next, we have a question from David.
Thank you. Workforce is a critical issue for the business community, nationally, provincially, and here at home in Brantford. Our chamber members in the manufacturing and skilled trade sectors place access to a skilled workforce second on their list of concerns, with business taxes being the first. The question is, what is the role of the municipality in the development of training and post-secondary opportunities? And do you support the municipality contributing financially to further these opportunities?
And we'll start with you, Cheryl.
Thank you. We'll start with yes, I support it. I'd have to see what kind of ways we would be supporting financially, at what end of the spectrum that is happening. We certainly, we know that we have a skilled trades deficit here. In Ontario, there is the same deficit. The ECDEV report actually says we're doing a little bit better than other municipalities, in that we have a 10% workforce percentage of people that are skilled trade certified or with experience. But that does not address the need that we have. We've got a lot of companies coming here, and they're quite surprised to see how difficult it is to get the skills that they need. And one of the companies that I was talking to, they said, I can either get somebody fresh out of school or I get somebody that's almost retiring, and they want to have that middle ground. So we need to encourage our businesses to have those apprenticeships, to be willing to take the junior people out of school before we lose the retirees at the top end with all that expertise. We have been doing some work in terms of Polytechnique has some welding programs now, and they're going to be adding some more programs. We've got Conestoga that's got their construction program, and they're looking at the needs. We've got the Skilled Alliance of Brantford, Skilled Trades Alliance of Brantford, that I think that we granted some money to in 2016 or so. So we're doing what we can. I'd like to hear what other opportunities there are for that. We tend to look to the province for these kinds of things, and so we could lean on the province as well. We know it's a need. We've got some fantastic companies here that we need to find local talent for, so that we can keep people here as well.
Thank you, Cheryl. Richard, you're up.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. I had anticipated this question, actually, because I've worked on this. It was myself that worked with Mr. Wilson and his company when he bought the Mohawk College property, and worked with Six Nations and Polytechnique to bring them actually to that college. It was a very difficult process. My board mate came on board and another member of council, and we brought that to council because when Mohawk College moved, the agreement was that you got the industrial land for free, but if you left, you had to pay us for it. So they had to pay us that money, and there was $450,000 in the account at that time. Six Nations Polytechnic needed that to carry them over to get started with that college there in university. So that vote barely passed council. It passed 6-5, but it did pass, and that money was transferred, and they were able to get the college started, and then they got a $5 million grant from the federal government. You should see what Six Nations Polytechnic looks like now. It's fantastic. But at a Chamber of Commerce event I think it was the MP's breakfast. I was there with a director from Six Acre Polytechnique while we were trying to get that going. And I buttonholed Dave Levac, who was our MPP at the time, and told him of the concerns we had with the skilled trades in this community that I was hearing from industry. And with that, Dave Levac got some people together, and we started the Skilled Trades Alliance. That was actually started through Dave Levac through that conversation. And we got Brant Skilled Center there, we got Economic Development in the county there, and from the city there. We got Six Nation Polytechnic there, we got the College of Trades there, Conestoga College is there at that meeting. Great. The Ontario construction industry is there. Representatives from the Ministry of College and Trades are there. And with that, working with business and with government, we were able to increase the trades programs in this community. Do we need more? Yes. But the process is in place. This group, through the Grand Valley Education Society, is doing a fantastic job of helping us fill this hole. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. And Mike, yes, I see you're ready.
I'm not very familiar with it, but I've heard of it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mike. And next we'll hear from Rob.
I've always said this in many elections, that government, municipal, provincial, federal, government doesn't create jobs. Businesses create jobs. And the other part of this cycle is to lower the cost of living so constituents have more money in their pocket to spend at businesses. When we look at apprenticeships and contractors, this is healthy, and it should be encouraged. Giving out grants, I can't go down that road. I think that a 5-year-old, we take off their training wheels and we throw them down the street, and if they fall, they get a cut. We put them back on, and within a week, they're riding a bike. We take the training wheels off a bike of a 5-year-old. It's time to take training wheels off of some of the stuff that we have been doing for 10 or 15 years and move on to other projects. The skilled laborers, the trainers, the contractors, they're the ones that are key to job creation in construction. Business owners, they're the ones that are key into employment development there. So again, lowering this red tape that the municipality has and making it easier to do business is key.
Thank you, Rob. Peter, you have the next question.
Thank you. In a recent survey of chamber member businesses, 69% of respondents said they feel only somewhat or not at all supported by the municipality in the operation of their business. Question is, what changes would you propose to create a more business-friendly and cooperative environment?
And we'll start with Richard on this one.
Thank you. First thing I'd like to say that the Chamber of Commerce has got that information of what businesses are unhappy. They should be making sure we're aware of it right away so that we can address those businesses first off. Secondly, I think council members need to get directly involved with the businesses. I've done that. I can tell you there's a business on Henry Street that was having a difficulty. It had a gate that slid across, and the gate actually came into the city's right of way. But the city didn't know that was in the right of way, and it had been there for years with that development. They were working on a $3 million expansion, and it was in jeopardy because of the cost of moving that gate. And here's the owner adding $3 million to his business, going to give the city $60,000 more in assessment on an annualized basis, and they're going to hire 12 people. And the staff were giving them a hard time. I mediated with staff and the owner, called me up on a Sunday, and I came right over, because that's our job. And he told me how upset he was. In fact, he said, if I could have left the city, I would have. So I understand what you're saying. And what I mediated with the city and staff said, look, this is partially our fault. We approved this some 15 years ago, and we split the difference, the $30,000 for the owner of the business and $30,000 for the city, paid for that. And we moved the gate, and the business got the expansion. And we're getting $60,000 a year more taxes, 12 more jobs. So I would say that we need to have councillors more involved with the business industry, hands-on, visiting them, just like we would visit our constituents at the houses when someone calls us up with a problem. We should know that business is unhappy right away, so we can find out what their concerns are and make sure that if it's red tape, get rid of the red tape. But do the things that make businesses be able to prosper, and let them know we care about them and how important they are to us. Then that's the thing we should be doing to raise those numbers. And we can't do it without your help. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Mike?
I just agreed what the statement that Rich made. He knows better than me, but I agree with that.
Thank
Thank
you. Rob, you're next.
I'm thinking Council Carpenter came over and wrote my stuff for me. So, exactly the same. But the reality is here, and I'm not going to tie up too much time. Council Carpenter hit it right on the head. Is meeting and having resolutions with these businesses. A lot of the time, small business, medium-sized business, and even the bigger guys, they already have an answer to the problem that they face. What they have is no one to represent them for those issues. So you have to be there at that table of resolution. You have to be able to negotiate with those businesses on these issues. Red tape is everywhere, and I don't like that word red tape because it just covers so much. Another issue here is employment supports. At one point, smaller businesses, people on assistance, could get some kind of employment supports from the city. Now, that's been clawed back a lot. There's still some there. And I don't necessarily mean financial. It's support of resume writings, business plan writing, all of this kind of stuff. If we can have that available, then that business will succeed. If the business succeeds, it creates jobs here. It's very simple. Red tape and to work with that business. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Cheryl, you're up.
Thank you. I find the question interesting without perspective because the very next question in the survey was that they only felt 50% felt somewhat supported or not at all supported by the business community as well. So when I look at the first question that you asked, why that they don't feel supported by the municipality, and when we're talking about the operation of their business, not a new business, so I'm trying to infer what we're getting to, new businesses, I think of red tape perhaps. Existing businesses, I think, well, probably the taxes is an issue for them. But without knowing what the actual issues are, I can't say what we'd be able to do other than we've got a really strong economic development department who's been quite assertive and really good at partnering both with the businesses and I believe with the Chamber. And Chamber's been doing a lot of work with them. What we need to do is get that presence profiled more here so that we're not doing what I just did, make guesses and assumptions around what that dissatisfaction comes from because quite clearly, I don't know what those issues are other than very business-specific things. So.
Thank you, Cheryl. David, you have the next question.
Thank you. There is a general consensus that Brantford needs a new hospital. And this came up at the MPP breakfast that was recently mentioned. And the numbers could be somewhat staggering. We've heard anywhere between $1 billion and $2 billion, and anywhere from 10 to 20 to even 25 years away. So the question is, what role should the municipality play in this initiative? And should the city contribute financially to a new facility? And over what time frame? What does this vision look like to you?
And we'll start with you, Mike.
I'm not familiar with that. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
But I'm learning.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll go on to Mr. Ferguson.
What we're starting to see in the city now is new clinics popping up, new smaller private clinics. We're starting to see doctors move out of the Brantford General Hospital into their own private clinics. So we're starting to see this already demand that was once a demand for a new hospital. We're starting to see it filter out a little bit. And I know there was a discussion perhaps of mental health services being combined as well. I recently spoke to a higher up at Canadian Mental Health, and there's a potential there that they could take Canadian Mental Health and the mental health services at the hospital and create their own little facility. And again, that opens up a whole new building at the Brantford General that could be redeveloped for patient beds. So I'm not absolutely convinced that we need a new hospital. I think we need to work on other things. We have a shortness of doctors. We need to attract new doctors to our city. Every day, people call or talk to us about shortness of physicians in the city, and that's where it needs to start, is getting new physicians to this community and then go off into perhaps a new hospital down the road. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Cheryl, we'll hear from you next.
Thanks. I'm convinced we need I'll say more hospital, whether it's a new hospital or whether it's a smaller new hospital in addition to what we've got. We've got some issues with space, and I know that some money has been approved to enhance our emergency room and try to at least get some better accommodation and capacity there. In terms of financially supporting it, you know, we continually get these asks from the province, and everything gets pushed down to the municipality, and I think that we have to continue to push the province to fulfill their obligations to a community who is strapped, both servicing 3+ communities in one hospital. We used to have the 2, we went down to 1, and we continue to grow in population. Are there other ways that we can support this initiative? Absolutely. Again, we have another task force. We are communicating directly with the province. The timeline, I think, is going to be problematic. I worry about this timeline. By the time we get there, are we looking at it again? So I know that the hospital is going through a very thorough assessment now. And I'm just not sure that it's the municipality's place to be financially supporting that, but I do believe that we need certainly enhanced hospital services.
Thank you, Cheryl. Richard?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. I'm on the hospital task force committee for a good reason, because I raised it originally, and then the mayor brought it forward in the resolution. We do need a new hospital. We've got a hospital that I fought against the closure of St. Joseph's when Mike Harris came to town and closed St. Joe's Hospital and moved things into the Brantford General. Having said that, it's not just the Brantford Hospital, it's a regional hospital. It's Brantford-Brant County, 6 Nations. So I'm in favor of a new hospital, but it is the responsibility of municipalities. In fact, all hospitals that get built all across the province, municipalities are expected to raise 10%, whether that be through the community, likely through the community, but municipality plays a role in that. I even have the location. I suggest it's going to be on the Sternberg Farm, which is the second farm in off of Powerland Road, east of Park Road. The city owns a 100-acre parcel of land there that's now inside the city boundary. But the new hospital would not just be a new hospital here; it would be the expanded Willett services, services to 6 Nations. Indigenous services in the hospital as well would be necessary to make the hospital work. A hospital started today would be 15 years before we started breaking ground. And it's about $1 billion. $100 million would have to be raised locally. So getting started on it now, just to get it done in time, we know that Brantford-Brant County is on fire, and the next 30 years it is already now the place to be. Everybody wants to be here. We're an hour from everywhere, like as Walter Benson said, center of the universe. It's going to happen here. Brantford's going to grow dramatically, Brantford-Brant County, and it's going to affect all of us. So we need to get ready for it now. You can't wait till the problem is there. But I want to highlight, we can't forget the hospital we have now and the fundraising, the capital fundraising is going on now. We have to continue to support that hospital while we're doing the transition. And then we've got to get the current provincial government on board with the LIN to give us the right to go forward with the hospital. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. And we'll move on with the next question, Peter.
The Grand River is one of our city's greatest natural resources. Question is, how do you feel the Waterfront Master Plan can be utilized or modified to ensure the best development of the areas surrounding the river for our city's future prosperity?
And we'll start with you, Rob, for this one.
Now, I've read the Waterfront Master Plan a few times, and one of the issues I see is the component of development or redirection. And I'm concerned about that. If you redirect things, other things happen. So I think that we need to go out and actually talk to people who live right beside the Grand River. And they feel they're ignored. I know it's not Ward 4, but still, the community needs to be involved in this. And they have a lot of good ideas with the master plan. And it strikes me as odd that their ideas have been ignored. So if I was elected, I would welcome the context to our citizens to get involved in the master plan, because there are a lot of ideas that are out there that should be in there. And if elected, that's what I would do.
Thank you, Rob. Cheryl, we'll hear from you next.
Thank you. I think that the Waterfront Master Plan was built with community consultation, and there's always time to gather more as time goes by, because sometimes these things take some time. I know that the city is looking and keeping its eye on properties to purchase. It should be for public use. We've got a great opportunity. We're having this river run through Brantford. There's some great opportunity for tourism, for domestic use and enjoyment, to draw people to live here. And also I see great opportunity for arts and culture to fit into all of those things that are part of quality of life. We've got a great trail system. I think that this augments it. I think that we need to continue to look at those properties that we can affordably purchase for the betterment of the city and for the enjoyment of both the residents who live here and those that we're trying to attract, and the businesses that come and the families that come with those businesses to live here.
Thank you, Cheryl. Richard, you're up.
Thank you. I'm very passionate about the Waterfront Master Plan. I was involved in what was a tremendous community consultation that went on for quite a while, and the community was fully behind the Waterfront Master Plan. It's gathering a little bit of dust right now, but the city still is working on it. In fact, most of the money that was in the fund for the Waterfront Master Plan was used up on trying to do work against a developer who wanted to build a large housing project on the waterfront. And we won that process, but it cost us a lot of money to fight that and to ate up most of that money. I moved in the last budget funding to go back into the Waterfront Master Plan so that when properties came up for sale along the Grand River, we could purchase them and open up the Grand River and make it accessible. I'm a member of the Waterways Foundation Committee for that very reason, because I like the trails, and I think the Grand River is in fact a gem that will promote the city going forward. The Mohawk Lake as well, and the trails. So that, we need to make sure that all that's working in our favor and that we're protecting it as well. The opportunities there are endless. And we better make sure that development that coexists with the waterfront exists in the right form. So the Waterfront Master Plan and protecting the Grand River, the watershed, and we must not forget the history. I mean, Brantford was the fourth largest industrial community, largest community in this country because the waterway was navigable, and the barges came up through the Grand River and up into Mohawk Lake and downtown Brantford and delivered the goods that made us a very prosperous community and the largest farm manufacturer in the world. So that's our history. We've got to remember the history of the Grand River. We're doing that by protecting the canal and rebuilding and cleaning up Mohawk Lake. Those are all great things that we're doing. Keep our assets, make them better. So the Grand River is certainly something we should be keeping in mind and protecting. And it is a heritage river. It's been designated as a heritage river for that reason. It's important for us, important for Six Nations, and important for the county. I'd like to see the County of Brant extend the Waterfront Master Plan into the county. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Mike?
Well, I agree with what he said, but I haven't heard any more. I don't sit on any of the committees, but all I know is that, like he said, it's gone to the dust. So that's all I know, but I agree with him. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. And the next question will be from David.
Thank you, Cindy. Brantford's overall crime rate is significantly higher than the provincial average and could deter growth and investment. And we've heard this statistic being moved around and disputed over a number of years. How can the municipality work with police services and other organizations to reduce this number?
And for that, we'll start with Cheryl.
Thanks for the question. There's a lot that can be done. We certainly need our policing to continue to do what it's doing, and more boots on the street is helpful. However, what we recognize is that individuals, residents, communities also need to be coming to the table and taking and claiming their part in that. And we're seeing some of those initiatives being very effective. We know that simply having eyes on the street deters crime. And so what we need to turn around, so those neighbors that are fearful and are coming into their houses is completely the opposite of what they should be doing. They should be sitting on their porches, meeting with their neighbors, creating community events, potlucks, whatever it is that they're going to do. We also, the police services has also started a program that's called Citizens on Patrol, COPS, and they wear bright jackets and they are eyes on the ground. They patrol areas. We've had an area that we've been working with that's very concerned about crime rates. And in a 6-month period, just having a couple of initiatives, the residents being more mindful of what's going on in their neighborhood and kind of target hardening their neighborhoods, but also having resident volunteer COPS members. We've seen over a 75% reduction in calls to police in that area. So there are things that we can be doing. We've been very active with that neighborhood in terms of what can you do for free, what can you do together, and how can we make our area safe and somewhere we want to be. So I think there's a lot of initiatives. What we need to do is have the municipality support those grassroots initiatives in whatever way they need to. Sometimes it's some advertising, but it's very low dollars, very low cost, and very high engagement.
Thank you, Cheryl. Richard, you're next.
Yeah, as Cheryl said, there's no easy answer for this problem. You know, we've got an opioid crisis in our community, in all communities across the province of Ontario, in fact, all across the country. We've got, you know, with the increased value of home prices here, we have a large homeless problem, a lot of large social housing problem. In fact, we've got people living in hotels where they're paying $900 a month, and they get a room and a bathroom. And if they're getting ODSP, they might be getting $1,200 a month. So you paid $900, you got $300 left. How do you eat? And how do you survive? It's not easy. So with those kind of things, what might come from that is petty crime. You know, the individual going down your street and the bike checking the car doors. They're looking for $15 or $20 because they know that you keep the cash in your ashtray. Those are the petty. We're finding petty crimes where people wake up in the morning and they had a fresh snowfall and they see footprints looking in their back patio window, so they know someone was there in the night. Or they leave their lawnmower out front for a minute, go out back to get a drink of water, the lawnmower's gone. And this is happening all over the community. This petty crime, cars being taken. It's all about people trying to make ends meet, and then you have the criminal element that comes with the opioid crisis in the community. As was said, we as citizens have to take control. It's not something we can throw massive amounts of dollars to a police department. They're busy doing the higher crime issues. But we have to, as citizens, take responsibility. We got to look out for our neighbors. We got to be involved in the Constable on Patrol, Citizen on Patrol program, and the Crime Watch program, you know, the old Neighborhood Watch. Speaking up and telling each other and getting to know our neighbors so that we share those concerns. I saw someone, you know, in your neighborhood, this person doesn't belong in my neighborhood. I've never seen this person here before. Talk to your neighbor and say, guess you call your neighbor, so and so. I see the vehicle around the neighborhood. We need to be more vigilant as citizens if we're going to prevent crime in our community. We all have to take responsibility for it. It's not something you can just throw massive amounts of dollars at and find a solution. The province has to get involved as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Mike, your turn again.
I commend the police for what they do. There was a situation, I was talking to a guy who had his truck broken into so many times. They took everything. So what did he tell me? He leaves the windows rolled down and the glove compartment opened, and he said, help yourself. Yeah, that's down in our area. He was telling me but I commend the police for what they do. That when they get together and help each other and everything, that's good too. I like that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. And next we'll hear from you, Rob.
Some of these crime reports are based on the actual arrest rates, whereas some are based on just the act themselves. So have to be careful there. I know in Maclean's magazine last time I read it said it was based on conviction rate, and I thought I want to be number one on that list. It would tell people not to do crime in Brantford, you know, because we're going to catch you. But the other issue here is proactive policing. It's there. We've got police officers on bikes. We've got police officers walking the beats. But who says it all has to be downtown? I've seen on Dunstan Street. I've seen some of these parks patrols come by on their bikes, and it's great to see them going from downtown to other areas. So the proactive policing really works. Comment that Richard made was, some of the other issues, mental health and addiction. You know, if we tackle some of those issues, our crime rates can come down. Who benefits from that is the citizens overall. a lot of the petty crimes are committed because of other issues, whether it be housing or mental health or addiction. But again, if we break that up and deal with those specific issues, crime rates will come down. We need more of a police presence in certain areas. We know that they do it in certain areas. There's 2 officers in a zone. Well, if we know this, then the criminals know this. So we need to change things up and put more patrols in areas that need it. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. And Peter, you have the next question.
Thank you. The federal government is eliminating the tax-free portion of council remuneration, which will increase the cost to the municipalities. Question: given the responsibility and workload of councillors and this unavoidable new cost, is now the time to move to full-time councillors for 2022?
And we'll begin with you, Richard.
I like this question because I don't understand what full-time counselors means. You're really saying full-time pay. I can tell you I'm a full-time counselor now, and the pay is not the issue. So I don't think raising the pay makes someone a full-time counselor. It means that they're receiving full-time pay. There's no way you're going to say that they're going to show up for work, or or what Councillor Jordan used to say, a warm butt in a seat doesn't make a counselor. You have to be participating and be part of the process. So, I'm a full-time counselor now because I'm retired from my previous employment, and I'm quite happy to do the work. I don't think that you need to have a raise or full-time counselors per se, unless you're going to say you're going to have meetings in the day and that's why you're full-time. I don't see any logic to the argument of full-time counselors. In fact, I think more counselors gives you more representation is better for the people. I know that we hear the opposite sometimes, especially from business. They say we want less politicians, but politicians don't cost that much to represent you, and having more voices help them represent you and speak to you and solve your problems, I think that's a good thing. So I would say no, full-time counselors isn't necessary, unless of course we're one municipality, and then you might be able to afford it under the same basis. But I don't think it's necessary, and it doesn't make a counselor do full-time work. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Mike?
I agree with his statement. I agree with it, so that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Rob?
This is often a comment that we get as candidates about living in wards, specific wards. And the argument I had is every election, the ward sizes and structures comes up. Every election. And we revisit it in between elections every term. So in this particular sense, I would absolutely agree with Richard that it is a part-time pay with a full-time job. I know as leader of my provincial party, I don't get paid a dime, but I spend 6 hours a day doing it. So it is the commitment to the community is full-time already. So I think I would just support keeping it the way it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Cheryl?
Thanks. All other things considered equal, I think the part-time counselor process works as well. I mean, if we were going to look at ward changes and one counselor versus 2 counselors, then that becomes a different conversation maybe. I have another full-time job, but I work very hard for my constituents, and it's a matter of process. I think that we may have some unintended consequences going to full-time. There would be people, even I think we probably have some councillors now who have served our council very, very well, who may be retired now but weren't before, and it would be difficult to leave that job behind because there's pensions involved and stuff, because you've got a 4-year term, and your term is at the will of the people, as it should be. But there are some things that would deter people from being able to take that full-time position. So all things considered equal, I think it works as a part-time. I think that you put your time in, you make sure that your residents know who you are, what you're doing, and sometimes you have to make the sacrifices and drop some of the things that you love to do. But that's why you need to be passionate about this work and love to do it.
Thank you, Cheryl. David, you have the next question.
Thank you. The city of Brantford currently has 18 advisory committees or boards and a number of task forces, with seemingly more added as issues arise. The majority of these have council representation as well as staff support. And this happens on occasion as well, but would you support a review of all boards, committees, and task forces to ensure their continued relevance?
And we'll start with you, Mike, on this one.
For me, that's too many committees. And on top of that, when you go out and door knock, nobody knows who the councilors are anymore. So less committees, I think it would be better. Then all the constituents would know who's representing them in the ward. Most of the time when you go by the house, they're not there. And they don't know they exist. I'm telling you. I wouldn't support it. Less for me is better. Thanks.
Thank you. Rob, you're next.
To answer the question, for review, yes. I think that there's a need here, whether these committees are serving their purpose or not, or whether the city, by establishing a new committee, could establish a new mandate. Accessibility, let's see if they're meeting their needs. There's obviously some concerns on Brantford Transit with accessibility. This has been going on for 2 years with no resolution. That tells me what we have isn't working. We need to review it so it can work better for you. So yeah, I would support a review so we could redo this committee things to benefit the citizens of Brantford. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Cheryl?
Thanks. I don't think the number is the issue. It's the effectiveness. And I'm completely open to review of anything, as long as the review is not with the mind to just blanketly close them down. We've got some committees and boards that are doing some really good work. And I think maybe, it should probably be on the agenda of every committee to review their mandate every year anyways. So the review process, absolutely. I think that we should be making sure people are doing, we do have clerk staff, and they're stretched thin. But yeah, for me, it's not about the number. It's about the effectiveness and the efficiency and what is getting done and is there output at the end of this. And the task forces, just to make, we designed task forces to have a beginning and an end date. Let's make sure that we find that end date for them.
Thank you, Cheryl. Richard?
Yeah, a review is always a good idea. We did a review a few years back, about 8 years back now, of committees. And we first of all did an interview with the committees themselves and found that the committee members weren't feeling valued because the direction that they were trying to give from the advice that they're supposed to be there for in the first place wasn't being adhered to by council or even make it to the council table. And we were supposed to change the process back then, that whatever resolutions they had passed at those committees come directly to the council table for a vote up or down and for a discussion of members of council, so that we can actually provide value to those members, providing a lot of their free time to the council for committee structure. Having committees where the public is having a say in reviewing what happens at council is always a good idea, for having them. So getting the community itself involved in participatory democracy, where they're having a say in what their community looks like and reaching out to the rest of the residents in their neighborhoods and their community is a good thing. Having a review, have they outlived their usefulness, or can that structure be changed? It's always a good idea to have a review, and that should be something that probably should happen at least every 2 terms of council, so you can make sure. Because what happens is members of council move resolutions, form a committee, and the committee stays on forever. And generally, the member of council that moves a resolution to form a committee has to chair that committee, and take some responsibility for moving the resolution at the same time. It's a sort of a process that we've developed over the years, and sometimes those committees go on when they don't need to. So a review is always welcome.
Thank you, Richard. And we'll have another question from Peter.
All right, thank you. If a new person or family to Brantford is looking for a place to settle, why should they move to Ward 4? What advice would you give them
We're going to start with Rob on this one.
Well, Ward 4 has all of us. But I think my answer would be Ward 4 with the development that's expected in the Garden Ave area, in the Power Line Road area, the growth, the housing, the business expansions, the businesses in Ward 4. I'm in awe. As an advertiser, I love all my clients. But Ward 4, I just love spending up there. The businesses, wide range of businesses, the Linen Park Mall, the restaurants along Coburn Street, the nature aspect of that. There's a lot of trails that are in Ward 4 or around North Ward 4. I think it's a good place to live. The community as a whole and the whole city take care of each other. But I think Ward 4 stands above the rest. That's the place to live.
Thank you, Rob. Cheryl?
Some of the same answer. I think that Ward 4 is a very welcoming community. We do a lot of community development projects that welcome new people, whether you're from a different country or a different city, just to learn. It's important to get to know your neighbors, right? I think with the growth that we've seen and that we will continue to see, that provides a lot of opportunity, both from a quality of life perspective, but also from a workforce perspective. So I think, and you've got tons of options in Ward 4, but as I said earlier, we've got really two distinct neighborhoods. So depending on what it is that you're looking for, what your family needs, or how you want to live, there's a lot of option, and we've got industry right in the center of it. So there's a great way to make a living, and I think Ward 4 is a great example of a great place to work, live, and play.
Thank you, Cheryl. Richard?
This is a great question. So easy. So thank you. So, why would I say you live in Ward 4? It got so many diverse neighborhoods. And the people in Ward 4 are so compassionate and wonderful people. Just look at Brantwood Park, for example, Brantwood Neighborhood Association, the best neighborhood association in the city, bar none. They led the way in what neighborhood associations should be doing about being part of their community. And then we look at other parts of the neighborhood like Echo Place, next to Mohawk Lake and Mohawk Park. What a beautiful area. And then you talk about Hickory, just next to that. Hickory Place, for example, where deer come up on your front lawn. Where you feel like you're in the country, you're next to nature. One of the hidden discoveries of Ward 4 is Echo Place in that particular area of Hickory Place. And the residents that move in there just love it. They'll never move. And the other reason why you want to live in Ward 4, because you're going to get the best damn council support and you're ever going to have.
Isn't that something?
Are those all your comments,
Is
Mike?
Brantford a good place to live? Is that what he asked?
Ward 4.
Ward 4?
Ward 4. What would
Beautiful.
you say to bring people to Ward 4?
Hold on. I was asked this.
Yes.
The community garden. Oh, you run that, don't you, Cheryl? I want to ask Cheryl the question about it. Or do I have to wait?
Yeah, we're asking you questions, and
All
if you
right.
have a question for Cheryl, I'd say
I have a
after
question
the
for Cheryl.
debate would be good.
And everybody wants to.
Tell us why you live there.
Why do I live there? Because it's an easy commute to the highway. For me, the neighbors are great, but that's all starting to change. But I like it. I got my own drum studio. I love it. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. And the next question will be from David.
Thank you. That last question was brought to you by the Realtors Association of Brantford-Brant County. And also the bankers. We talked a little bit this evening about the Mohawk Lake District. So again, a bit of a free-form question. In describing, and obviously there's community consultations and lots of activity still to happen prior to a full build-out of the Mohawk Lake District. But from your perspective as a candidate this time, describe what your vision of the Mohawk Lake District looks like. What are the key areas or services that would improve the neighborhood and benefit the city and the community as a whole?
Sorry, we're going to start with Cheryl on this one.
Thank you. Again, another great opportunity that affects Ward 4. But what we're hearing is, and I agree with, that we don't want to see a full-on blowout development, but we want to see mixed use there. And we have some agencies that would fit well down in that area as well. So we've heard everything from, it's okay to have some residential space, but let's make sure we have a large portion of green public space. Perhaps I've heard outdoor theaters, a place where people can gather and enjoy the water, enjoy the culture, enjoy the heritage of what Mohawk Lake brings to the city. I think that we also look at, I think there needs to be a component in any development that we do. We need to be looking at our affordable housing. But make that full mixture so that we have multi-demographics, we have multi-use, and again, it's another area that our ECDev department can bring companies to say, this is another gem that we have to offer to your employees when they move to Brantford. So very mixed use. We don't want to see that highly developed. We want it to tie into the lake, the trails, and the green space that is so nurtured in Brantford.
Thank you, Cheryl. Richard?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Again, another one that I just love because, you know what, it was some time ago that Phil McColeman called me up and he wrote an article in the Brant News and he had never received so many hits on it than any other article he's written. And then they do a search to find out anybody else that's been mentioned with Mohawk Lake, and my name came up the most. So he invited me to his office to understand what my vision was. And my vision then was for Mohawk Lake was to see that Mohawk Lake down the canal all the way to the corner of Coburn and Clarence to the University District. My vision was to see access from there, from the trails, maybe horse and carriage ride, who knows, but it's a vision. So, and preserving that land and the canal all the way down to Mohawk Lake, and the vision that it was, when my mother was a girl, that's where everybody went to the dances and to find a beau and to date. That was the highlight. That was and they took the trolley car because Brantford was the second city in Ontario to have electricity because we had Mohawk Lake producing electricity at the Watch generating station. So keeping the Watch generating station there, maybe it won't be ever generate electricity, but it could be there as a heritage feature. And the canal is being designed as a heritage river. Mohawk Lake, it collects the water from Charing Cross all the way down in the storm sewer. And you'll know where it goes to Mohawk Lake or to a lake because we have a yellow fish program where in front of the sewer there's a yellow fish painted there. And that means that whatever you put down that storm drain is going to a lake or a river where the fish live. And so it's important there's 17 different kinds of fish in Mohawk Lake. It's only about 9 feet deep. Anybody that knows anything about the Grand River knows that you pick up a rock, the Brantford River is like silt. And it's just like baby powder, dirt, and it just floats along. And the Mohawk Lake's been filled through the canal with that kind of a silt over the years when the dam was there. And it's full of carp, and that's why the river is cloudy. It's not because it's dirty. It's because the carp are stirring up that water all the time and preventing oxygen from getting down and getting things to grow. So we are going to clean up that river. Phil McColeman has got us the money, and we've got it in the budget, or the lake, and the opportunity is there for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Would you like to add to that, Mike?
I think there was a meeting about that a few weeks ago or a month. Well, the people there are scared or they're worried. I feel bad for them because the backyards are sinking. What are they doing? They're watching it to make sure the backyards in the houses. I could be wrong, but I believe I was there for a meeting. So I didn't want to bring it up, but that's, I like the place, but I worry for the people there. Thanks.
Thank you. And next we'll have a question from Peter. There will just be 2 more questions, and then we'll wrap it up. Oh, I'm sorry, Rob.
Property rights, as Mr. Goldman has said, is impartial there. It needs to happen. I would oppose kind of the development of this area. I think that this is part of our history. I think that it's been underused. There's been talk from entrepreneurs about pedal boats in Mohawk Lake. There's been rickshaws in Mohawk Park. There's missed opportunities that are there. I want to also give a hat tip to the Grand River cleanup crew, your continued efforts, both in the Grand River and Mohawk Lake, on behalf of everyone here in our ward, in the city. I thank you for your efforts. It goes a long way. I would like to see Mohawk Park preserved and encouraged for recreational use, the green space protected. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob, and I'm very sorry about that. So now we'll have the last two questions. Peter?
Our infrastructure deficit is daunting, and events of the past 12 months have heightened the issue. Question is, what programs and/or services do you favor reducing or eliminating, or what efficiencies would you recommend in order to direct more financial resource to infrastructure?
And we'll start with you on this one, Richard.
I'd stop building the things that we would like to have, the extras, until the infrastructure is done. And I talked about it earlier. There's lots of things that we'd like to have, but the infrastructure is important to maintain and fix. But we need to work on generating revenue for that. So I would say we look at the cost-benefit analysis of building more houses that cost us money, and look at what makes us money, and how we can make that built into the infrastructure. So I would suggest that we get on with building the 2 industrial parks, increase the revenue. When you say what services am I looking to get rid of, absolutely none. And in fact, I don't think that we should make Brantford less of a city because it's not managed for the right mix of industrial, commercial, and residential. I think we should be finding that balance, clearly identifying it, and not going beyond it so that we don't get into the... There was a time when Oak Park Road was built out. Shelter's Lane was only about half built then, and Mike Hancock was then mayor. We were in great financial shape because the costs weren't there. It wasn't a full built out Shelter's Lane. It's not those people's fault that those costs are hitting us now. It's our fault for not building industrial parks. And we still aren't we don't have industrial park going forward. Even if we start now, it'll be 4 to 6 to 8 years before we get industrial. But we got to dig ourselves out of that hole and be planning for that right mix and balance to build the community. I'm not in favor of getting rid of services, and every time council goes down that road, it's a futile exercise because the citizens don't expect that. They expect us to manage their taxes better, not cut services from them because we didn't.
Well, thank you, Richard. Mike?
I agree with him. I don't want to see any of the services go. The Liberals aren't here anymore. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Rob?
What we need to do again is not spend more money, but spend more wisely. Again, we have to develop a foundation, a solid foundation of a reserve funding to invest in infrastructure. We also have to look for inefficiencies. And again, it doesn't have to be services that people use. It has to be inefficiencies. And if we look, we can see them everywhere. 100 city vehicles used for personal use. No gas mileage accounted. $1,000 a month, that's $30,000 a month. That, $1.2 million a year, $4.8 million in 1 4-year term. Simply by making them account for their mileages, we can save that money in half. So one idea, $2.4 million savings. So if I can do that, you can do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Cheryl?
I'm also not in favor of cutting services. As a representative, we have to look at everybody's services and what's important to everyone. And in fact, again, as a representative, I went to the constituents and asked that very question on social media. But so the question was, what 3 services would you be willing to live without? And the caveat was, pick one that you use. Because everybody will pick something that they don't use, right? That's the way it goes. And it was very interesting. First of all, many people were not aware of all of the services that we provide. But the most common answer was to reduce our garbage pickup and get those organics going, which is something that we're working on. So cutting services, every service means something to someone. We are going down the road of efficiencies. We've done some investigation in different departments to update and upgrade and modernize the way we do things so that instead of 15 processes for an invoice, or I can't remember what the numbers are, we're down to 5, so which cuts the cost per item. So, and then we have to continue to look at revenue streams, and I go back to that intensification, and I know for some people that's a scary word, but that more people paying for the same services is going to help with our tax stabilization.
Thank you, Cheryl. And we'll have the final question from David.
Thank you, Cindy. We congratulate you for putting your name forward to represent the citizens and the businesses in Brantford. The role of a city councillor is demanding and requires an in-depth knowledge of everything from potholes to the Waterfront master plan to the city's strategic plan. Question: tell us why you would be the best person for the job.
We're going to start with you, Mike.
Why would I be the best person for the job? First of all, I have the qualifications and I have the skills. Why? Because I learned everything from the city of Hamilton. And you know what? I get right on the case. Potholes, we're working on them now. So I know what's going on. And water and wastewater and everything else there. So I have the skills and everything else. I don't want to repeat myself. But I know exactly what's going on in the city with potholes because I drive over them every day. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Rob?
I've always said in elections that I can relate to anyone, whether it be mental health, addiction, whatever the issue. I think that experience, provincially, federally, municipally, business-wise, I live here, I work here. I love this community. I think this is the best community. And I think I have a passion for this community. And I'm willing to work with the citizens of Ward 4 to better the ward. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Cheryl?
As a first-term counselor, I can attest to the breadth of knowledge that you need to have. It is daunting, and when you first get here and you're still trying to find out the people you need to ask the questions for the first couple of months. But what makes me best for the job is the willingness to learn, the willingness to ask the questions, being open-minded, doing the research, being willing to read a planning plan that you start off having no idea what's going on with it, but finding the right people to help you with it. I've got experience in small business. I build good relationships with my colleagues, with staff, with the residents. I'm a good communicator, willing to get back to people, even if I know it's the news that they don't want to hear, but they want a response. I came to this job through a neighborhood association background, the Brantford Neighborhood Association, and that's a great place to figure out what the people in your community need, what they want, what makes their life happy and a good quality of life. So I think all of those things combine to make me a good candidate to work for.
Thank you, Cheryl. And Richard?
Ward 4 has always had exceptional councillors and candidates, from Charlie Warwick, Andy Woodburn, to the current candidates, quite frankly. What makes me a candidate is experience, 24 years of experience, knowing how to get through staff, get things done. That's what makes me more than qualified. And I'm very passionate about my people, as I call them, my constituents. Being there that long, I've gone to their funerals, to their weddings. They're part of my family. They're part of my friends. It's no different than anything else you'll be involved in, whether you're involved in some kind of sporting activity, darts, or what it might be. That's where your friends will be. This is where my friends are, where I've kind of grown up. And so I'm passionate about trying to solve problems for my constituents. In fact, I lose sleep when I can't find a solution to it. And I'm very unhappy when I have to give them the bad news. It's very difficult that they can't fix something. I don't like the word can't. So it makes me qualified as a good counselor and as a good candidate for Ward 4 is that I care about the people, I care about the city, and I'm very passionate about what I do, and I work with others very well.
Thank you very much, Richard. That is all the time we have for questions. The candidates will now make their closing remarks. The order has been reversed from opening, and I will remind you that you will be each allowed 1 minute. And we will start with Mike.
Well, I'm the same as Mr. Carpenter, very passionate with working with other people. On top of that, I also know staff at City Hall, so that's pretty good. From the entrance all the way to the office, which is something else that is good. And I'll help the people as much as I can. And I too would hate to give them bad news, but if I had to, I would. But I love the people in Ward 4, from the one end to the other. And hopefully, I'm asking for your help and your support for Mike Ullman, October 22nd. Please and thank you.
Thank you very much, Mike. Next, we'll hear from Richard Carpenter.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the residents of Ward 4 for your support over the past 24 years. It's been both an honor and a privilege to work on your behalf. I believe that when you place your confidence in me by electing me to be your counselor, my job is to work for you. I do not consider myself a dignitary. I am a servant who listens to your concerns and works diligently to resolve any and all your problems you send my way. If for some reason an obstacle gets in my way, I continue to search for solutions till one is found, no matter how long it takes. I care deeply about the work I do for you. I take great pride when we can resolve something that makes our community a better place to live, work, and play. I address your concerns as if they were my own. My compassion, enthusiasm, and love for the city drives me to live the job as your representative on council. You make the city a better place when you ask me to represent you by placing your trust in me. Well, I do not do this alone. It is you who deserves the credit for building a better Brantford. All this is possible because you and your continued thoughts and guidance to me. Once again, I ask for your support so that we can continue to build a better Brantford together.
Thank you very much, Richard. Perfect timing.
Thank you. We have exciting opportunities and challenges ahead of us. As a community, we need to build solutions that help us to prosper as we work hard to manage our upcoming growth. We've started on many important initiatives and we need to see them through. I want to thank the residents for their support in 2014. And on October 22nd, I ask you to vote for Cheryl Antosky as your representative and partner for Ward 4 in continuing to keep Brantford the great city it is to work, live, and play.
Thank you, Cheryl Antosky. And Rob Ferguson.
Again, thank you for putting this on, and thank you for Roger for broadcasting it. It's always an honor to appear on ballot here in Brantford-Brant. We often get asked, why do we run? It's because we want to make a difference. I have to think that people run out to the polls and they vote for the same old, expecting different actions or going somewhere else differently, but they continue to vote for the same old. In Ward 4, we have different. We have got Richard Carpenter, who's dedicated many years to Ward 4. Mike, Cheryl, and Richard, they're going to be fighting for your first vote. You get 2 votes. I'd like your second vote. So if you vote for Cheryl, vote for Rob. You vote for Richard, vote for Rob. You vote for Mike, you vote for Rob. I ask for your community support. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you to all the candidates for sharing your thoughts with us this evening and helping us to appreciate your commitment to our community. I'm sure that tonight's discussion will greatly assist the residents of this community when they go to the polls on October the 22nd. Thank you to Rogers for partnering with our Chamber of Commerce to help provide this opportunity for residents and for our business community. The Ward 5 debates will be held on October the 4th. Once again, thank you for joining us this evening. Please exercise your vote to your right to vote on October 22nd. Good night.
Nice job. Okay, the next movement is outside squats for the outsides of the knees. For this one, you're going to start sitting on the floor in a cross-leg posture. You're going to keep the pressure on the outside of the ankle and stand up. Keeping the legs crossed, you're going to control it and return back to the floor. Switch your legs. Same thing. And control it back to the floor. You can do 5 reps per side and 3 sets, and that should be good. Okay, the next movement is a natural knee extension for the quadriceps in the front of the knees. So for this one, you're gonna kneel down. You could use a mat if it's helpful to take some pressure off the knees. You're gonna keep the knees about shoulder width apart or hip width apart. Keep the torso completely vertical. Keep the hips open, so don't fold at the hips at all. And you're going to gradually lean back. I'll demonstrate first. And pull yourself forward in that position. The ideal goal is to get your head all the way to the floor. But at the beginning, you can go back to about a 45-degree angle until you develop the strength to go a little bit further. So we'll do 5 reps. Nice job. That's 3, 2 more. And last one. Nice job. So 5 reps, 3 sets should be good. Okay, the last movement in the series is a natural leg curl. It's for the hamstrings, the muscles at the back of the leg and just above the knee. These muscles are extremely important to develop to avoid knee injuries, to keep the knees healthy, and also helps you develop your jumping and explosive power. You're gonna need a partner for this drill. You start kneeling down on the mat. Your partner's gonna be positioned behind you, holding your ankles down. Okay, so they're gonna have to put some weight just above your Achilles tendon to hold your ankles down. You can start with your knees about hip width or shoulder width apart. You're gonna start with a slight lean forward with the torso until you feel some tension in the hamstrings, just some mild tension. And then you're gonna lower the forehead to the mat and come back up under control. 5 reps. Once you get stronger and you can make it more challenging, you can take the chin to the floor. And once that becomes easy, you can take the chest to the floor. Okay, 3 sets, 5 reps should be plenty to develop your hamstring muscles.
Thanks, Darren. Basketball is going to have injuries. Joint preparation is essential to success. We want to see you next time. Shake Tree Hoops, Homework Hoops. Are you as good as you can be?
I was born from the bottom, but raised to the top. I was born from the bottom, but raised to the top. I was born from the bottom, but raised to the top. I'ma keep on climbing, I ain't gonna stop.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line, email us, or connect with us on social media.
Huntington's disease is a hereditary degenerative disease of the brain.
It affects your behaviors, your mind.
And it's a relentless disease.
If you took Alzheimer's, if you took schizophrenia, if you took Parkinson's and you mix them all together, you would have Huntington's disease.
Huntington's disease is devastating.
I just hope that I'm the last.
The next chapter in Ontario's future will be decided October 22nd. Before you head to the ballot box, get to know the people running to represent you. Watch the local campaign as candidates debate the